Johnny, I want to talk to you first. Johnny, this just seems to get worse and worse, and it seems to come up all the time. It is perfectly legitimate to say Benjamin Netanyahu, possibly not the best leader of Israel, maybe some of the stuff he's doing isn't particularly good, but when you get into so much of what is said, including by people in some aspects of society who wouldn't dream of, you know, being racist, as they would put it, you know, calling someone who's black the N-word, who wouldn't dream of being homophobic and slagging off gay people, but somehow, anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli sentiment, which are not quite the same thing, but are sometimes linked, seems to be okay. Why is this happening, Johnny, do you think?
Because it's being allowed. It's as simple as that. There's not one protester who came out in support of peace with Israel, and the police haven't done enough. And the worrying thing about this, Peter, is that this is a breach of the social contract, not just for Jewish people, but for British people. We build our country on defence and security. They're two different things. Defence obviously is the defence of our country with military, and security is about being able to live our lives in freedom. And that is what we have enjoyed in this country, perhaps more freely than in other countries, even in Western Europe. But that is beginning to break down, and people need to understand that this is blatant anti-Semitism, and the police are not doing enough to shore up what is basically a social contract between the British people and between the British people and for example, the royal family, who we are subjects to.
You're a bit of a hero, and it's a delight to interview you. I know you're not Jewish, but you're someone who understands when you stand up, make a perfectly reasonable point in society, that you get horrendous abuse that you've received over the years, online and in person as well. Tell us a little bit about that, Anne.
Oh, thank you very much, first of all, Peter, for having me on, and hello, Johnny. Yes, I think what Johnny has said is quite correct. I think it's because they get away with it. When I first stood up to Mary McCardle, a woman called Mary McCardle, who was the only person who was ever convicted of my sister's murder. Both my parents and my sister were attacked by the IRA while walking home from Mass in 1984. Dad was shot 6 times, and Mary was shot once in the back by a different gunman. And as she lay down on my mum's chest, that same gunman put the gun to my mum's head and pulled the trigger twice. But fortunately, the gun jammed. So I was 14 at the time. They were a couple of 100 yards from our. We heard the gunshots. Myself and my brothers went out. I saw my sister lying on top of my mum and then being lifted off her, and my dad. And that impact of that terrorism has remained with me for all of my life. So in 2011, when I kind of thought that life had, I was sort of dealing with it, Mary McCardle was appointed special advisor to the Sinn Féin culture minister. And when the BBC researcher who phoned me to tell me this, to ask me if I knew about it, when she told me it, I felt that I had been punched in the stomach. Everything came back again. I was that 14-year-old child running out of my house, down to seeing my sister and my mother and my parents on the ground. And of course, speaking up against Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland is something that most people just don't do, not unless you're a politician or you're getting paid for it. But certainly
and I think as well, there will be people in the rest of the UK and beyond who are watching this who say, hold on a second, Anna's just told us this horrendous story. Someone who was involved in the murder of her sister then becomes an advisor in the Northern Ireland government. She speaks up against it and says, actually, this is not okay, perfectly understandably, and you get horrendous abuse. Tell us a bit about that abuse.
Yeah, so I've had threats to my life. I've had, constant sort of notifications or just of hate about myself, from how I look to calling my father, saying my father sort of deserved what he got, basically. Contacting my employers, just constant.
Why do people think it's okay to do this? Do you think it's not disagreeing with you, it's abusing you?
I think they think it's okay, Peter, because they get away with it. And I personally know a number of people who have gone along to the PSNI in Northern Ireland, the Police Service in Northern Ireland, they've made complaints. I mean, I actually made a complaint to the An Garda Síochána here in the Republic of Ireland about one particular individual who stalked me for about 3 to 4 years. It was constant every day. And to go in and make that statement is really difficult because one, you sort of think, you're part of your head's thinking, this is online, I shouldn't be letting this affect me so much. It does affect you. It affects your sleep.
Of course.
Affects your trust. I mean, I became worried that people would know who I was or where I was going. So it takes a lot to go to the police to make that statement.
Yeah.
And the police, to be fair, do best, and you give all these screenshots to them, but then when the Public Prosecution Service don't actually prosecute.
And that is so often the problem. Just a final word from Johnny, and we are up against the time. I'd love to talk to you both more, but a brief final word from Johnny. That is the problem. When these things happen, people just don't have confidence in the police to deal with the hatred that's out there, Johnny, do they?
The head of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, was on my most recent podcast, Johnny Gould's Jewish State, saying that the laws need to be sharpened up. And so Mark Rowley is a counter-terror expert, but I must say that might appear to be passing the buck. There are laws, there are institutions within the police's armoury that can deal with this. They are just letting this go. And as I mentioned, the social contract, not just with Jewish people, but with the whole of British society, needs to be shored up. These are very, very desperate times. And I recognise exactly what Anne is saying as well. Very, very important times to remember who we are.